are a lot of archetypes, concepts, and tools that as a writer you can use to basically set up a basic structure for a story or arc. You have David versus Goliath, the hero's journey, and one of the most common yet effective, Betrayal. My name is Tom, welcome to Let's Talk with Tom, and today we're going to talk about a show, but it's going to be a little bit different than I want to talk about how betrayal is used in She-Ra and the Princesses of Power by drawing a comparison to a completely different medium of storytelling. Now, the thing about the concept of betrayal is it can act as a platform to explore relationships, dimensions of a character, the complexities of motivations, and even just the basic idea of good versus evil. And this makes it a really fun and dynamic angle to write. Not only is it easy to get people interested, but there are a lot of moving parts that are easy to manipulate and use to your advantage. And this can really help you flesh out your story or your characters, or both. And She-Ra and the Princesses of Power use this concept to create one of the most sympathetic and beloved villains in modern media. Ever since the release of the first season, people haven't really been talking about Adora as much as they've been talking about Catra. The thing that makes Catra such a compelling character is the fact that she has such a close relationship with the protagonist. The two of them were once best friends, partners in crime, all until Adora was called away to take the mantle of She-Ra, leaving her best friend behind. Her best friend, who she told she would always have her back, leaving Catra to face everything about the evil horde on her own. Adora repeatedly tries to extend an olive branch to Catra, trying to get her to see the error of the horde's ways and come over to the good side, but Catra refuses, because if Adora was willing to turn her back on her best friend for these completely different people that she'd never met in her life, then were Catra and Adora ever really best friends to begin with? Now, you can draw your own conclusions on that statement, but I know a lot of you are probably like me, where every once in a while your friends might, forget to invite you to something, they might leave you on red, and then you're like, alright, they hate me. That's basically what happened with Catra. But it's hard to definitively say who turned their back on who in this relationship. Is Catra turning on Adora because she won't take Adora's offers to come over to the rebellion and face off against the evil horde together? Or is Adora turning on Catra for the fact that she was willing to change allegiances and leave the evil horde with or without someone she claimed to be a ride or die for? And beyond this specific situation, the relationship between Adora and Catra was strained long before all of this. For a long time, Catra has felt resentment towards Adora for the fact that Adora was achieving all of the goals that both of them wanted to achieve, while Catra had to sit behind and basically be the reject.
I was hoping you could be, I don't know, happy for me.
And this caused a lot of negative feelings, especially in an environment like the Evil Horde, where there's so much pressure to succeed. And we also have to consider the amount of pride that Catra had, and to have Adora stick up for her because Adora is more respected and more valuable to the Evil Horde is humiliating to Catra. It's humiliating because she doesn't want someone to stand up for her, and she doesn't want to have Adora basically flex this muscle that she is this important figure in the Evil Horde, when that important figure should be Catra, at least from Catra's perspective. The reasoning for Adora leaving the Evil Horde is very surface level and easy to understand, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially when the complexity comes from Catra's motivations. The fact that in this universe, the effects of the hero's actions aren't just justified because, the other person's evil. Adora is actually held accountable for how her decision to go and be She-Ra affects her best friend. So it's not only expected, but you're put in a position where you kind of have to sympathize with Catra to some extent. But at the same time, we know we're supposed to root for Adora over Catra because the legitimacy of Catra's feelings don't trump the fact that she's aligned with an evil imperialist empire. However, let me ask you something. What if that wasn't the case? What if you took these two characters, and there was no rebellion, there was no evil horde, it's just the two characters, their relationship, their motivations, the whole situation, who would we actually be compelled to root for? Now, we can say whatever we want, but without an actual case study to justify that answer, there isn't really an answer. But what if I told you there was a case study? What if I told you there was a specific situation grounded in reality where this story happens and there is no objective good or evil and people decide to root for Catra? Well, that situation actually did happen, and it was in professional wrestling. Now, I've been a wrestling fan for years and years. I even trained to become a pro wrestler before deciding to pursue a different career path, but hey, who knows, maybe I'll go back one day. I'm gonna leave that open-ended. But in my time, both in the ring and among different audiences, I have come to understand that wrestling is an incredibly engaging forum for storytelling. Now, I understand that the vast majority of you are probably not wrestling fans, and that's fine. You don't need to be a wrestling fan to understand what I'm about to talk about. I'll explain what needs to be explained as briefly as possible, and to start, I'll first address the question that is on a lot of people's minds when pro wrestling comes up, and the question you're thinking of, the answer is yes, but as someone who has actually done it, we don't say the 4-letter F word. We don't do that. Because even though everything is predetermined for the most part, it's a show, what you see happen in the ring, there are no smoke and mirrors. There are techniques to protect yourself and your opponent from getting legitimately injured, but if I tell you to punch me in the face, even if I'm telling you to do it and I'm okay with it, it's still gonna hurt when you do it. A good way to explain it is, remember Dragon Ball Z in the Frieza saga when Vegeta told Krillin to blow a hole through his chest so he could get a Zenkai boost? It's basically like that. Vegeta still had to go through the experience of having a hole blown through him, but he was going along with it. He consented to it happening, he asked for it to happen. That's basically how wrestling works. Now, even though the legitimacy of pro wrestling as an athletic and physical art should be respected, above all is a vehicle for storytelling. It's kind of like a soap opera, and even though sometimes the writing can be abysmal or ridiculous, when it's done right, it is the most real and engaging form of storytelling that you can consume. And there's actually a really compelling story going on right now in professional wrestling. The funny thing is, it kind of came about on accident because it was that dynamic of Catra and Adora, and for whatever reason, the writers seem to think that people would side with the basically Adora stand-in, despite the fact that the actual story that was being told was not going to let that happen. Because when they went to turn longtime babyface Becky Lynch heel by having her attack her best friend Charlotte, the crowd erupted in cheers. They were not supposed to do that, but it happened. The thing about wrestling is everything goes back to the audience. Everything you do is meant to get a certain reaction from the audience, and sometimes you go to get a certain reaction, and you get a completely opposite reaction. Sometimes you try and fight it, but most often it's best to just go with it. And that's thankfully what they've started to do with this story. Now, a reason that Becky Lynch got cheered over her best friend Charlotte is because this is basically the story of Catra and Adora. You have a tall, blonde, naturally gifted, athletic woman who is a part of a legendary lineage across from a scrappy but capable red color-coded former best friend with a lot of attitude. However, the reason that Becky Lynch, who was essentially Catra in this situation, got the good guy reaction is there is no evil horde or rebellion or any type of alignment to tell people you have to root against this person. These were two individuals with their own motivations, justifications, acting on their own accord, and the crowd was left with the autonomy to basically choose who they think was in the right. And they overwhelmingly decided that Becky Lynch was in the right. So the real question is, what exactly about the story between these two makes it so much like Catra and Adora? Well, a few years back, WWE launched this campaign to basically revamp their women's division. For years, their women's division has been criticized for a long list of reasons, but basically they started to change things because they saw, hey, in UFC, in the Olympics, all these places, women in athletics are starting to be more respected and treated more seriously, and if we don't do the same, then we're going to be left in the past, and pro wrestling already has a problem getting respect from the mainstream media, so if they are still treating women like objects and really only have them on their shows for sex appeal, that's going to make it really hard to be taken seriously coming into the new era. Now, among this whole women's revolution, as it's been called, there have been a few select women who have been chosen to basically carry the torch and carry this concept into reality. This was where the idea of the 4 horsewomen came in, which consisted of Sasha Banks, Bayley, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte. So Becky Lynch and Charlotte were best friends. Sasha and Bayley are best friends too, but they're not relevant to this conversation. Becky and Charlotte are best friends. At first, both of them were making really big strides in changing the face of women's wrestling in WWE and as a result, wrestling as a whole, even though WWE kind of behind the curve when it comes to women's wrestling. So both Becky and Charlotte at first were treated with a lot of respect. They were given a lot of opportunities, but eventually Charlotte started getting a lot more opportunities, and Becky Lynch was kind of getting fewer opportunities. Charlotte Flair is a blonde, white, marketable face, and she is the daughter of one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, Ric Flair, and she's good enough on her own to escape his shadow. So she has been given the world. She has been given everything, and for a long time, you tune into SmackDown to see Charlotte just dominate everyone. Like, she is just the queen. She is winning championship after championship, match after match. Meanwhile, Becky Lynch is barely on TV. But people really like Becky Lynch. Becky Lynch, she was charismatic. She was likable. She had a lot of talent in her own right, but she was being undercut by her best friend. And it was only when Charlotte actually had to leave TV for an injury that Becky Lynch finally got the opportunity to come back into the spotlight and challenge for the SmackDown Women's Championship. However, as soon as she gets this match, Charlotte comes back and gets added into the match because she's Charlotte. She's Charlotte Flair. You gotta add her into the women's title match. So now it goes from being a one-on-one match between Becky Lynch and Carmella to now being a triple threat match. And triple threat matches, let me explain the storytelling a little bit. You can tell a lot of different stories with a triple threat match. You can tell a story of someone overcoming the odds, beating two people, or you can tell a story of someone basically doing all the work, trying their best to win, and then someone fresh comes in and kind of takes the win out from under them. That's basically the story that was told in this match. Becky was doing everything in her power to finally reach for that brass ring and take her spot back in the spotlight, and then Charlotte came in, took the win from her, and they were best friends. So Becky Lynch was supposed to be happy for Charlotte. She was supposed to congratulate her, hug her, and instead she hit her in the face. And the crowd was ecstatic because they were tired of seeing Charlotte on top. They were tired of seeing Becky Lynch be put in Charlotte's shadow. And now that Becky Lynch was finally like, you know what, I've had enough. I'm standing up for myself. You cannot take my dreams away from me. Everyone was on her side. And then as she feuded with Charlotte, and eventually did become SmackDown Women's Champion, it was cathartic. And she not only took the championship that she had earned and deserved, but she also became one of the biggest stars in professional wrestling today. Like, she is so big to the point where people are talking about the idea of her facing Ronda Rousey in the main event of WrestleMania this year. Something that no woman has ever done. And I don't have to explain to you why Ronda Rousey is a big deal. We all know her, we all know why she's a star. Becky Lynch, in a matter of months, managed to reach that level of stardom. She resonated with people and reached a level of popularity the same way that Catra did, through the same exact story arc. I mean, not exact, but a very similar story arc. And the fact that WWE genuinely thought that people would cheer for Charlotte over Becky Lynch is insane to me, because based on the build up to that moment, there was no reason why people would turn on her. For the exact same reasons that people love Catra so much, despite the fact that she is a villain. Literally the only thing that would make most people not like Catra is who she's associated with. Outside of that, it's hard to believe that people would actually root for Adora over her, just because Adora, despite her likable qualities and sheer badassery, isn't as interesting or sympathetic as Catra. So they need that concrete thing to align her as evil, because otherwise she would become an even bigger hero to the fans than Shira, like Becky Lynch did to Charlotte. That, or they would have to water her down, and you would lose a big draw for the show. There are some ways I can see a Catra face turn work, but that would happen more towards the end of the series. For right now though, Adora and Catra are such good foils for one another that the roles they have currently work perfectly. There's nothing wrong to me with Catra playing the role she does, because it enhances the show as a whole. By being such an amazing antagonist, she makes Adora a better protagonist. Similar to how, ironically, Charlotte Flair's father, Ric Flair, was a legendary villain who made every good guy he worked against so much better, and now he's celebrated as one of the greatest of all time. So I personally see nothing wrong with Catra being evil if it means she has the opportunity to enhance the show better than she would in any other role. So go watch Shira, or watch wrestling, or watch something else that'll make you happy. The camera died. I've said what I'm gonna say. Goodbye. Thank you for watching Let's Talk with Tom on the Roundtable, but Tom isn't just on the Roundtable. I have my own self-titled personal channel. I have a Twitter, I have an Instagram, I have a Snapchat, I have all that good stuff. In fact, I even have a Tumblr. So if you're interested in any of that, check that out, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.